In life, you have sales and you have positioning. And we're always selling at every moment, whether you're a creative, whether you're a thought leader, because you have to negotiate your value in terms of every time you want to get hired, every time you want to speak, every time you're invited to do something, right? You're basically negotiating your value.
Hi, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, you'll get my conversations with peak-performing thought leaders, creatives, and entrepreneurs. Every week, I bring you the latest scoop on what these incredible people do to succeed and how you can get their secrets and do it too. And hey, do you want to become a member of the Innovative Virtuoso Club? Our virtuosos get all sorts of exclusive content like bonus episodes just for you and videos to boost creative adrenaline and problem-solving juice. Go to isoldet.com/virtuoso to learn more. And now, let's get on with the show. Hello, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I am super excited that you're here, and I'm really thrilled to introduce you to my guest. Check this out. As a former U.S. diplomat turned PR guru, Gloria Chou hacked her own way to get early-stage, pre-launch startups into top-tier outlets without ever working at an agency or having industry contacts or anything to get results. She advocates that PR shouldn't just be a luxury for later stage companies. And now she teaches her winning 3-step formula to help visionary founders make a bigger impact. How amazing is that? She's also the creator of the PR Starter Pack, the first PR in a box solution for early stage founders. I know I need that myself. So Gloria, I'm going to be talking to you about that. And she is a mentor at the Female Founder Collective, I Fund Women, Career Contessa, and other founder circles with a mission to help them gain credibility and traction without ever spending a penny on ads or agencies. Gloria, I am so thrilled that you're here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is great. It's really so fascinating to me that you went from being a diplomat to doing PR, and I can't wait to hear how that transition happened. But first, you started as a Foreign Service officer. What about the work of diplomacy inspired you to pursue it?
I've always traveled a lot. I grew up partly in Asia and partly in the States. So I always wanted to pursue something that was international. And I was very interested in diplomacy and international relations. So in my academic life, as I was going through college, those are the courses that I sought out. And so I always thought that the life of a diplomat and working abroad was always very fascinating to me. I think I was also a little bit idealistic because I think it's one thing to want to work in international relations. It's another thing to work in a government bureaucracy. So that's kind of initially what sparked my interest.
Amazing. Yeah, I totally understand government bureaucracy. I worked at NASA for over 20 years. So there's always something that you're going to have to fill out new paperwork. Now, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to become an FSO, and you did it. And I have to know, where were the countries where you worked?
I was in Brussels and also in Toronto, Canada. And my next tour was going to be in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
Wow.
But I actually resigned before that to pursue something a little bit more entrepreneurial and creative.
Wow, that's so cool. I love Brussels. My favorite bar is called the Marionette Bar. It's down in the basement with 17th century life-size marionettes on the walls. So cool. So, okay, you went from being an FSO, a Foreign Service officer, to taking on PR. And you just said that you had wanted to be more entrepreneurial. But what made you choose PR? How did you go from being a Foreign Service officer, traveling all over the world, to public relations?
It's so funny. I wouldn't really say that I wanted to do like PR in terms of like working in an agency or being in the industry. I just always grew up being everyone's unofficial hype woman, right? I just loved to see, people win. And I was always really good at storytelling. So, obviously working in diplomacy, I wrote a lot of speeches, a lot of talking points. So, the communication side was always there, but I wanted to use my interest, which was to hype people up, to make sure they felt empowered with storytelling in new ways. And so when I left the Foreign Service and resigned from kind of my station, I knew that I wanted to pursue a career in communications. And I also really love tech. And so I applied for, I want to say over like 1,000 jobs. I
Wow.
had people putting in referrals for me at all the big tech companies. And I never could quite secure a role because they kind of looked at my resume and was like, okay, we're really kind of confused about what you do. Like, obviously you have an interesting resume, but we're really looking for someone with very specific experience. And so I think the whole theme of my career is that you are allowed to try different things, and you are allowed to hop in different industries as long as you have like those core intentions and kind of the skill sets that can translate really to any industry. And I know from the surface it seems like such a huge leap, but for me it really wasn't. It was hard, obviously, because I faced thousands of rejections, and I went from having such a prestigious career where I had a pension and everything to being rejected from 1,000 jobs. So that was kind of an awakening moment. And that's really kind of what made me become an entrepreneur, was that the current model of working at an agency, of working at a big corporation, doing their PR, it wasn't available to me. And so I had to kind of create my own lane, if you will.
That's so interesting. And it sounds to me, just from hearing you speak for just a little bit, some people work really well in big companies with a lot of hierarchy, and some people really need to march to the beat of their own drummer. And I wonder now, is it possible that that's part of why it didn't work for you? Because you are doing things differently. Just like you said, I wasn't crazy about the bureaucracy in the government. Maybe that's why it didn't work, so that you could find and funnel into your own passion and storytelling and public relations. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like you are on the right path for you now, or is there something else that you could be doing in addition to this?
I will say that being in this generation, right, where we are not as rigid as our parents' generation, where you picked one career and that's kind of all it was, and you stayed in that career. I feel like with technology and kind of our emphasis on like being able to embrace your passions, and 2020 being a year of reckoning for corporations and people recognizing that there are models of remote work and freelance and flexible work, that you can still be a very productive part of a society, but not having to really like be married to a company. I think all of these things are coming in like a perfect storm, and people are realizing you can be many different things. Like, for example, yourself, you were in NASA for 20 years, but now you have so many different interests, and you're able to cultivate that in different ways through your podcast and other projects. And I'm the same way, right? So, people say, are you like, what kind of PR do you offer? It always takes me a while to kind of explain to them that I don't really consider myself like a PR person. I really consider myself kind of a coach to entrepreneurs, right? And finding new ways for them to achieve their goals, that kind of breaks the confines of kind of what you were told before, which is you either pay for ads or you hire an agency. And those are kind of the only avenues that you could do it with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I get that. And now I want to step back a little bit and say, we're talking about PR, and you're bringing up some wonderful, amazing points that you can do it on your own in creative and different ways, which is fabulous. But what is it? What is PR, and what makes it important for business owners and entrepreneurs and even creatives? How do these people, or these small companies, or maybe medium-sized companies, how do they use it, and why is it important for them?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities between, when we talk about PR and marketing. And the example I like to use to get people to understand the difference is that, imagine a man and a woman are on a date, right? And the man is telling the woman how successful he is, how he's a really great guy, and all the different things that, he thinks she wants to hear. So that's marketing. You're saying the right things to the right people. Now imagine if the woman goes home and her best friend, who is the most trusted confidant, calls her and says, that guy you were on a date with, he is such a stand-up person. He volunteers at all these charities. He has such a good reputation. I saw him at so-and-so. So that is really PR, right? It's having someone else vet you so that you can raise your position, you can raise your value, but not you directly telling people. And so that's really kind of what PR does. And that example really highlights the difference. So it's really important to understands that, in life you have sales and you have positioning, and we're always selling at every moment, whether you're a creative, whether you're a thought leader, because you have to negotiate your value in terms of every time you want to get hired, every time you want to speak, every time you're invited to do something, right? You're basically negotiating your value.
Mm-hmm.
So if you increase your positioning, then you have to do less selling. And so PR is the most powerful way to increase your positioning and thought leadership and raise your kind of subject area authority, so that you really don't have to do that much selling. And it works for direct to consumer. It works for whether you are trying to get your skills hired, if you're a freelancer, or if you want to be invited to speak at a conference.
Okay, that's fascinating. So, it's almost like not what you say yourself, but what other people say about you. Is that
Yes.
okay? So when you're doing that, when someone else, this reminds me of Wikipedia pages that you cannot edit your own. It has to be created by someone else. When someone else does raise your, I guess I'd say cred, your credibility, what sort of control do you have over that, over A, it happening, and B, the sort of the quality of what they say, of what they write? How does someone navigate and manage that?
Well, when you talk about media, and so I'm talking about kind of raising your profile in the media, right?
Okay.
Something that everyone can have access to.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really three buckets of media. So there's the earned media, which is when a writer from the New York Times, when a credible, legitimate, columnist or an editor writes about you, that's earned media. You're not paying that person to write an article, right? That's earned. And so that is arguably going to be the most difficult to do, right? Because that's going to be the highest benchmark, and they're very picky with what they do. So that's earned.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have your owned, which is like the content that you own, that you put onto your podcast, onto your blog, onto your website, or a press release, right? You're the author of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so while that's credible, it's not going to have as much legitimacy and credibility as someone else like the New York Times talking about you. Right?
Right.
And then you have the paid avenue, which we can tell from all different types of research and customer feedback that it's just getting less and less effective, right? Customers
Mm-hmm.
just don't want to be targeted with ads. So those are really the three types. And depending on how much reach an outlet has, it's going to be much harder, right? Because you're competing with every single person pitching to a Fast Company or New York Times or Wall Street Journal. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many different types of earned media. There's so many different outlets. There's podcasts, there's industry blogs. So I want to encourage people to say, don't just go for the top tier, because there's opportunities to win at each level. But if you understand your messaging and you can cater it to the outlet, then you're going to be way more successful in getting across to that editor and building that relationship with someone who is in the position to carry your message to millions of people. But it's a process.
Oh, absolutely. And I thank you for what a great answer. So when that happens, when someone who may not be top tier, maybe somewhere, I guess, lower, gives you, you pitch them, they give you their attention, that's not a paid thing. That's not something that you're paying for. And you teach people how to do that. You teach people how to get press without spending money. What does someone need to know, and how do they do that? How do they make that happen? What's the first step in starting to get press like that without spending money?
Yeah. So in terms of the step-by-step on how you can get press, I think there's really two buckets. There's kind of the step-by-step action plan, and then there's a required mindset shift that
Mm,
needs to happen. And so I will first talk about the mindset shift, because I
okay,
believe mindset is everything, right? As
absolutely.
founders, I work with incredible founders who are on the precipice of building really breakthrough solutions. And I always find that they're super head down in their product or their solution or the specific things that they offer, that they're really unable to zoom out and make their thought leadership relevant to everyone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the mindset shift that every founder has to master, if you really want to get onto a top tier, whether it's a podcast or newspaper, is you really need to be a thought leader. So what does that mean? It means instead of talking about why your product or solution makes sense to the customer, you need to talk about why it's truly relevant to our daily lives in the here and now. And so that's a little bit more difficult,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're not talking about your product specs, and you're not talking about your customer testimonials. So that is a mindset shift that you have to make. Now, in terms of the action plan, I have a 3-step method on how you can get press, even if you're pre-launch, Yes, I've done it. Even if you don't have a single customer, yes, believe me, it happens, right? The first one is you need to make a media list. You need to know who are the authors, the writers, the podcasters, the staff writers who are in a position to carry your story to your audience. And so you're going to want to make a media list. And you can go on my website, gloriachoupr.com, that's CHOU, to download your free media template. And it's going to be an Excel spreadsheet where you can start to populate with all the different writers. And you can set up a Google News alert so that every day you understand what are the articles that are being written about your industry, and you can literally copy and paste the writers and start to build a directory, if you will. So that's really number one. Number two is you got to find your angle, right? You got to translate your product brochure into a press-worthy story. So it might be something that's seasonal to what's going on right now. For example, I worked with a career coaching platform, and we were able to translate his platform into something that was relevant by surveying 2008 graduates and comparing their attitudes with 2020 graduates, because we're in the worst, jobs climate. And so having that data and using that survey, he was able to be a thought leader to talk about what people really needed when they graduated in 2020. Right? What were the nuances? And so he was able to speak from a position of authority. So that's how you can find your angle. Maybe if you are in fintech, if you are an accountant, maybe it's a new tax policy. Maybe it's something with the SBA loan, something that's regulatory. That's going to make your pitch really urgent and juicy, right? And the third one is while you are, sending out pitches to editors, you can still raise your profile, right? What are the things you can do? For example, instead of publishing on your blog, take that time and offer it up to a higher domain authority website like a Forbes or a Fortune, because they do accept sponsored, and they do accept contributor pieces. So offer that up right on a Medium, right on a LinkedIn, something that has a little bit higher traffic than your website so that you can get more eyeballs, right? You can also maximize your announcements and try to see if you can partner with someone who is an influencer in your industry, someone who has, way more visibility, and maybe offer to do a partnership where you say, I'll invite you to speak on my podcast or do an Instagram live or contribute to, a certain thing that we're doing, and we can co-author this. And that way you can use my channel to advocate for your upcoming book launch or whatever it is. And then I can also benefit from your visibility. So there's many different ways you can kind of raise your profile. And so those are kind of the 3 steps to get there.
That was a masterclass in the beginning of PR in that one answer. Thank you so much. This is fabulous. So, okay, you said a pitch. What is a pitch, and how do you make it good? Well, how do you craft a good pitch, and what needs to be in one?
Yeah, so this is kind of the most important skill set, and arguably the most difficult, because I think what is holding us back from even pitching and breaking free from paying for ads is human nature, that we're afraid of rejection, right? When you try to distill everything that you've worked for and your company into 2 paragraphs in an email, it doesn't feel good when someone doesn't respond. So I understand the resistance. But if you can push past that fear, miracles start to happen. And that is why I've been able to get pre-funded, pre-revenue, my clients without a single customer in Time Magazine, in Bustle, in Well and Good, in these big places, because you were able to break free from the limiting belief that you had to be a certain, it had to be the right time for PR, or that you needed to have some fancy higher up vouching for you. So get rid of those limiting beliefs first before you pitch anything, right? That's not a winning mindset. Secondly, if you want to make your pitch super juicy, well, first of all, you asked me, what is a pitch? For me, for early stage founders, it's probably going to be the first point of contact that you make with a journalist. And it's going to probably be an email. And so it needs to be very concise. You need to make it easy for them to write a story. And you need to have a really punchy subject line, because you're only as good as your subject line. You need to not attach anything in there. It's going to trigger their spam filters. So the ability to tell your entire company story in 2 paragraphs is really the skill that we're talking about here, right? And I've done this thousands of times. I failed a lot of times, but I've learned from not having any contacts and not having anyone help me do it, and me falling on my face over and over, is that I created a method from the wins that I had. So I realized that when I pitched to an editor and it had these 3 components, it usually got a response 80% of the time. And so what are these 3 components? It's what I call my CPR pitching method. C stands for credibility, P stands for point of view, and R stands for relevance. So if your pitch, if you can have one line about why you are in the position to talk about this subject, right, your credibility piece, and then you want to have your point of view, where the industry is headed. Maybe it's using a survey, like I mentioned before with my client, so that you can kind of forecast what are the things on the horizon. Because human beings, we love to know what's going on, right? What's going to happen to the marketing industry in 2020? What will this mean for that? How does X affect Y? That's what I mean by that. And the relevance piece is the one that founders get stuck on, because they have all those things, but they don't understand why it's relevant to right now. So being able to tie your story and your commentary to something that is an urgent problem is really going to be kind of the make or break factor. And so what are the things of relevance? Like I said, maybe it's a seasonal story. Maybe if you're in commerce or in fashion, maybe it's a story about holiday shopping and how the retail landscape has changed in 2020. Maybe it's about new grads and the jobs climate. Maybe it's tax season or whatever it is, tying a piece of regulation and policy to it. Those are all the things to make your CPR pitch really, really good. So again, to recap, CPR pitching method is my method I came up with so you can start to write your email pitch to an editor. And it needs to have credibility, your point of view on where your industry is headed, and the relevance to why it's important to write now.
I love CPR. It's very easy to remember. What if you're a founder who doesn't have that notion? Like somebody who's an early stage founder, they might have an idea for what their point of view is, but maybe not. I mean, that's why they call you, right? I imagine if someone doesn't know the answers to these questions, they would work with someone like you and go, hey, how do I find that out? And how do I figure out what relevance is? And by the time I pitch it to someone, might the thing that I thought was relevant 2 weeks ago no longer be relevant? How do you figure that out? And what do you do on things that are really timely but might be short term versus thinking about long-term trends and where things might be going?
Well, with everything in terms of, marketing, PR, you're always going to have kind of a different cycles and different seasons. So I'm not saying that you're going to have one pitch for the rest of your career, because trends change, customer behaviors change. But practicing that early and being able to understand how to talk in terms of talking points and talk in terms of story angles and not just be a glorified brochure, that's always going to be something that is going to be advantageous to you. It's going to allow you to be invited to tables. Any kind of doors will open for you if you want to speak on a panel, if you want to maybe contribute to a blog post, whatever that is. So that is kind of just the basic framework. Now, obviously, because I've written hundreds of pitches using this, when clients book me for my pitch writing session, which is the PR starter pack that you mentioned, we actually flesh out all the different things that they want to talk about and really zoom in on one. And say, what is the one that you feel most comfortable having that first point of contact with a journalist? Now, so there might be 5 different things that you want to talk about, but let's just start with one, right? And see what the feedback is from that. Now, obviously, there's different ways you can reach out to journalists that doesn't require email. There's also Instagram DM, they're on Twitter, they're on LinkedIn. So it's very easy for you to A/B test these different things. And as you get familiar with, what journalists are tweeting about, once you start following them, once you get Google alerts going, then it's going to be very fresh in your mind what journalists are aware of and what they want to talk about. And you're going to be able to be very quick in terms of sending them that response and say, hey, I noticed you tweeted on this. Have you thought about this? Or I'm seeing this. So that is really a way for you to start practicing your pitch and being able to be relevant quickly.
Yeah, in a timely manner and quickly. And it's fascinating. You said, you can just tweet at someone or reply to something they've tweeted or posted. And some people, this please forgive me, I'm probably a little bit older than you are. And it seems to me like you need to have a pretty good grasp of tech in order to be able to do that. If you are somebody who's an older founder and you aren't that well versed in tech, are there old school ways of doing it? Or do you basically just have to go, bite the bullet, get on Twitter and Instagram and start reaching out and commenting?
Well, I will say that if you're an older founder, you probably are already on those avenues because you want to get the audience's attention. So it probably makes sense to just use the avenues you already have. where you're doing your marketing anyways, and just instead of connecting with journalists and influencers, and instead of connecting with just customers, why not build a media list where you can connect with journalists and writers on the avenues that you're using?
Okay. It makes a lot of sense. It's just, I know that there are a lot of, especially women, who are going back into the workforce or changing careers in their 50s and 60s and may or may not know some of these avenues. So it's really interesting to me to see, how do you do that when you feel like you've just jumped into the ocean and you don't know which way to swim? But let me ask you a question. You mentioned something. You were talking about a press pitch, and then there's also something called a product pitch. And I'm wondering, what is that it? How do you do that? How do you decide whether or not it's a product pitch or a press pitch? And what do you use each for?
So a product pitch is what you use for kind of marketing, right? You're speaking to the consumer. You're talking about the different things that you offer, the different ways that customers can use your product, the ROI, the product specs. And that is not as helpful to a journalist, right? Because journalists are interested in kind of the general topic, the bigger discussion that's being had. So if, for example, I worked with a founder who has kind of have you heard of ClassPass? It's kind of like a ClassPass for kids activities. We can go online and book all kinds of karate classes and ballet lessons through a portal. And it's kind of all tech driven, right? So it's like, today, okay, I have a free time between 4 and 5. I want to select a kids activity near me. And so that's kind of what you would do. And during COVID, she lost all of her pipeline, right? Because no ballet lessons and stuff could be open. Right. So what did she do? So instead of talking about, what she offered and what was in her platform, she did a survey to all of the parents who were using her platform previously and asked them if they were, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely were they to pay for a virtual class, right? For example, we're all doing virtual things right now, anything from wine tasting to Zumba classes, whatever it is. And she actually found that over 80% of the parents who were booking these ballet lessons and martial arts classes, they were not willing to spend a single penny on virtual classes. So that is a really interesting dichotomy, because I don't have children and I'm really willing to pay for Zoom anything, right? There's even like Zoom hair braiding classes, right? But parents were a tough crowd. And so this data she took and she presented it to a journalist, and it really highlighted the irreplaceable aspects of kids' activities and kind of what parents were doing and how they were different from consumers who didn't have kids. And so that was kind of a story that we wrote for her. And so that highlighted many different things, including, audience behavior, consumer behavior, and kind of just where her industry is headed. And it's not looking very good, because it seems like they're not able to go virtual, whereas so many other things are.
And isn't that interesting? Because I would imagine having your kids have things they can do would be important, even if they can't, during the height of the pandemic, leave the house or whatever. So did you talk about that at all? Like, what was the reason behind parents not wanting to do that sort of consumer behavior? Or is that something that is next step when you're creating the story, when you're creating the pitch? Would you talk about that? Or would you basically go, this is what I see happening, and the rest can wait for another time?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because we did write that in the pitch. And then at the end of the pitch, we talked about what parents were doing instead, right? And we found that what they were doing instead was getting private camp leaders, socially distant, in a backyard, and having 4 or 5 kids doing these backyard summer camps, but in like a very confined way. So they were doing that instead. So instead of going to summer camps, they hired their own camp leader. Everyone was wearing masks, and they had 4 or 5 kids that they vetted to be in a backyard for a certain amount of time. So the pitch was really, Zoom is taking off, but parents are a tough crowd. Instead, they're doing backyard summer camps. So that was a pitch that we wrote.
Yeah, it seems like you're putting the final punctuation mark on that. It makes sense. So when you're doing this, when you're creating these pitches, who are you pitching to? Are you pitching to journalists, editors, various kinds of reporters, bloggers? Who are the important people to know when you're building this earned media through, and your credibility through this system?
I think, all of the above, right? Because you're going to be, you want, like, there's no such a thing as like too much press, especially if it's a good story. It's not a contentious story. So so it's really important to have a really robust media list so that you can connect with as many editors as possible. Because the first time that you pitch, they may or may not respond, and they might say, well, we actually just wrote a story about this. So at least for the next wave, if you're attuned to what they're writing, you can get in at the right time. Right. So this is very important when you don't want to pay for ads and you want to cultivate an organic relationship. There is going to be that ramp up time. Right. But the great thing about that is that that's going to be in your back pocket. That's going to be your contact that you can have for the rest of your career, to be able to be on a first name basis with a journalist, to be that person that the journalist is going to call whenever they need a commentary on X, Y, and Z.
It's interesting. I have used Help a Reporter Out. I'm sure you know what that is. And so for if you're listening and you don't know what it is, it's a website where you can get emails from reporters who are looking essentially for pitches for stories. And what was interesting about this one story, I ended up getting featured in Fast Company, but I didn't know it was Fast Company. They were asking about something having to do with public speaking and fears of public speaking. And I went, I know something about that. I wrote a book on that. And so I pitched it. But what was interesting is I wrote the article. I wrote the article as if that was going to be the whole thing that they published. And the reporter got back to me and said, hey, this is great. Can I talk to you? This is for Fast Company. Absolutely. No problem. How do you manage that? I did that because that's how I get my earned media. I basically don't just pitch stories. I write the stories, as it were. But if somebody's not comfortable doing that, what do they actually write in order to gain a journalist's interest and then also their trust?
Well, you really hit the nail on the head. Not every founder has a bandwidth and time and a skill set to write a story, right? And so for a lot of them, the CPR method really works because it allows them to just have the first point of contact with a journalist so that they can at least get the journalist to respond or get on the phone. And what happens is that once you're on the phone, the founder is an expert, right? It's really allowing the founder's expertise to come to the forefront because they know their stuff better than anyone. So even if you hire a PR agency, that's what they're going to do as well. They're going to just connect you and then you're going to take over the conversation. So once you're on the phone with them, the journalists, being professionals, they're going to ask you questions about what their audiences are interested in. And the founder should have no problem being able to take that conversation to the next level. Now, obviously, if you have a lot of good content and if you have writers on your team, then yes, you can definitely write a piece that is fully fleshed out and offer it to a Fast Company or a TechCrunch. And they do take contributor pieces. And that's what I talked about earlier. But that's going to take a lot more time and bandwidth. But you are presumably making it easier, but it's still going to have to be vetted by the journalist. And so I always say, let's just shoot for the stars in the beginning. And at least if that doesn't work, then we can try to see if we can, give them a piece that we already wrote out. But that, again, is going to take time and effort and bandwidth.
Well, if you are writing that and within that framework of not taking the time, as I was growing up and doing any kind of marketing or PR work for my own businesses, I wrote a lot of press releases. Are they still the best way to get the word out, or are there better ones? And if they're still good, what needs to be in one, and what shouldn't you do?
So, like all of the business tools, I really think PR is a tool, right? Just like marketing, ad spend, they're all just different tools that you can leverage, but there is a way to get the most bang for your buck, if you will. So I think if you have a press release, it's going to be searchable. It's going to be on Google News. It's going to skyrocket your SEO in a way that you writing about something on your blog just is not going to get there, right? It's not going to be on Google News. So press releases still work in the sense that it is the most formal and public way to make an announcement and make it really official. So if you have a funding announcement, if you're launching a new podcast, if you have a partnership with a household name, if you're doing some charity initiative, I think those are all great ways that you can leverage a press release and make it worth your money, because press releases are not cheap, right? You have to pay a newswire service to distribute it. But if you are seeking investor money, if you know you're going to be in the industry for a long haul, I think it is worth it. Now, in terms of press releases, I always like to kind of bundle my announcements. So for example, you might want to announce that you have a really big customer that's a Fortune 500 company, and maybe you want to bundle that up with a new product launch or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or it might be you have a new board member who is someone from a very prestigious background, and it shows that your company has a lot of interest from someone of that caliber. You might want to bundle that up with something else. So there are ways to make press releases very punchy, and don't think that you need to have a press release every single time that you announce. And if you actually go on my website under resources, I wrote a blog post for the German Accelerator, and it's called top five PR tips for startups. And one of them was actually use press releases strategically, because no one likes that annoying kid in the corner that's raising their hand for every question, right? So you don't want to, you don't need to be writing a press release for every single thing that you did. But if you can really maximize your announcements and try to see if you can secure an exclusive from a journalist, because you're never going to have as much leverage as when you do write a press release. These are all the strategic ways that you can make that announcement super, super maximized.
That's great. I love that it looks like there are many possible avenues to get to the center of elevating your state and credibility with respect to PR, and yet there are some things that are very sort of specific. Like you've mentioned that there are best days and times to pitch, and that's very, instead of being a more, oh, we'll elevate the brand and we'll elevate your company, that's very do this. It's very technical. So what are those? What are the best days and times to pitch, and what makes some better than others?
This is kind of the age-old question, right? Like when to send out an email blast or when to. So people are going to say different things, but usually I like to send out my pitch for clients on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday, because Fridays, long weekends, Mondays, they're kind of catching up. And I like to send it between 9 to noon, because they're actually at their desk. A lot of the reporters in the afternoon are on assignment. So those are kind of the days that generally work well. Now, obviously, I don't want people to walk away from the podcast thinking an email is all that's going to take. No, it's going to take an email and a series of follow-ups. And during the starter pack, I actually incorporate not only the email pitch, which I write for you, but also the DM, like the kind of direct message for social media, so that in one day you can say, hey, I wrote you an email yesterday, and this is why it's important. Let me know if you haven't received it. And in the age of information overload, in the age of people being so accessible, you're just going to need to keep breaking those barriers, because an email is just simply not enough.
When is it too much, though? That's the thing that I've always been concerned about. The hi, I've called you. Hi, I've emailed you. Hi, I've DM'd you. And I worry about being a nuisance. Is there a point at which we are a nuisance, or are we really kind of supposed to stay in the mindset of I'm just giving them another avenue to put it in front of their eyes?
Exactly. I think that so many founders are so afraid of being rejected, and pitching to a journalist is so foreign to so many people that they don't even get to the second and third stage. And I will say that the only times I've actually gotten my pre-funded, pre-anything clients onto a Bloomberg, CNBC, a Fast Company, is when I actually went past my fear and pushed past that and did the follow-up and called them and did all those things. I don't think a lot of founders will even feel comfortable picking up the phone, to be honest. So I would actually urge founders to push past their uncomfortability, because a lot of them just stop at the email stage. Mm-hmm. And I would actually urge you to actually keep reaching out, because that is what's going to take you to get ahead of your competition who are doing that.
And you basically shouldn't worry about ticking off the the journalist.
As long as you follow my methods, which translates your product ad into a press-worthy angle, you won't feel bad about reaching out, because you're no longer pushing a product, mm-hmm. right? And so that is why it's so important to master that messaging and to be able to translate your product brochure into a press-worthy story. So you won't feel like you're, hassling them and kind of just like trying to use them as a free avenue to put your product brochure. So that is what's so wonderful about being able to master that kind of transition and being able to be a thought leader. So, I've never had any founders who use my methods who were like, oh, wow, this journalist got really pissed off. I've only found that the more you reach out and the more you are in that mindset of, I have some really important information. I have proprietary data. I have really interesting things that people need to know about where the industry is headed. And if you stay in that mindset, that's going to give you that momentum to want to keep reaching out. So I've never had a founder stay in that mindset and actually got a response that was negative from a journalist.
And that's really great to know, because it is, I can imagine, I have been there. I have been in that space of, I feel like I'm haranguing them and I don't want to, even though I think that what I'm trying to say is valuable. It has value. It just, you're right. There's a mindset shift that needs to happen. And in order for us to be able to push through and to, I guess, almost evolve. And that brings me to another question, actually, this evolutionary aspect of everything that's going on right now. You mentioned tech early on, and it's expanding at a blinding pace. How do we use tech, and what's going to happen? How do you envision PR will evolve with the way technology is going?
Well, if the pandemic and the fact that remote work and flexible work and different ways of working hasn't taught us anything, it's that the old models, they're just not as powerful, and the status quo just will no longer work in this environment, right? So I don't think that, a lot of times people think you need to meet journalists at events and you need to keep networking with them and invite them out to dinner. Well, now that's not happening. So does that mean that news stories aren't being covered? No. So it just goes to show that you can tap into these organic avenues to get a journalist's attention, to get that investor's attention, if you really know how to master your messaging in a way that's value first. And so PR in the same thread, I don't think that the big agencies are going to be able to be as powerful as they are and have as much grip on the industry if they're not going to be willing to adapt a little bit more. Because founders are, with the starter pack, with these different avenues, learning that they can do their own PR and that they don't really have to go through and rely on other people's relationships if they really truly have something that's unique and interesting to say.
That's so fascinating. It reminds me a little bit of the music sort of revolution and the publishing revolution. In many ways, it sounds like the PR industry is going through a same kind of growth that in music, independent artists sort of went, okay, we have a platform and we can get out there without being beholden to the big record companies. And the same happened with authors and book publishing, the book publishing industry. Is that sort of the same kind of thing that you're talking about here, that because founders are realizing they can do it on their own, that sort of independent spirit will start taking the front stage now?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I see that in the marketing agency industry, in the ad agency. It's people don't need to rely on these fancy relationships and Rolodex as much as before. And you're able to have a super, super incredible and resonating campaign, hiring talent that's not A-list, and hiring a lot of independent artists as well. So I had a chat with my friend who has a boutique marketing agency, and she's getting all of the clients that these huge marketing and ad agencies used to have, because a lot of companies are understanding now that these relationships are less and less powerful. And I think ingenuity, being able to be a storyteller and having that narrative, that's really more important than the status quo of having a fancy Rolodex.
And that's so interesting what you just said. I love that idea that the fancy Rolodex isn't as important, but being able to tell your story. I caught on to that. You said that and I went, okay, so I, as entrepreneur A, exhibit A, if you will, I have to figure out how to tell my story so that it brings value to others. But you, as a person who owns this company that helps people do that, when you're helping someone write, I imagine there are lots of different kinds of founders. There are lots of different kinds of entrepreneurs and business owners that you are working with. How do you change your mindset to figure out what's best for each one?
Well, during the PR Starter Pack screen share session, I have a format that I follow, right? So there's intake questions. I ask them where they are in their journey. Do they have anything upcoming? And so that way I can understand exactly what their goals are. But I will say that PR is not directly a customer acquisition avenue, in the sense that the purpose of PR is not to get you more customers. It's to elevate your authority in the marketplace so that you have social proof and you have traction. So that's really important for founders to understand, right? That it's not going to be a direct pay for click kind of result, but arguably it's going to be able to make your brand name and credibility much more valuable. And so I would say it's arguably even better than having that direct customer acquisition kind of pay for a click, whatever it is. And then we go through a framework of my CPR method. I start to flesh out their pitch, and we might have maybe 5 or 10 different pitches that we want to write. But in that hour, we zone in on the one that they have the most data points, that they feel most comfortable talking about, and that they feel is most urgent and relevant based on the trends that they're seeing. And so by the end of that hour, I'm able to flesh out a pitch, using that one angle. And they're able to see how a pitch is written, so that if they do want to go back to the drawing board and go back to that document, they're able to kind of fill out kind of that format using what I've already given them.
But it sounds to me though like you help them shape it, like you reflect back to them what they're saying in order to formulate the actual pitch and to fill out the document and formulate the pitch. What process do you go through inside yourself to be able to do that?
I will say the one thing that's really helped me in my career is that I'm a generalist, right? Before I was a diplomat, I was a TV producer. And so the fact that I've definitely hopped around and worked in different fields and I've never really stuck with one allows me to take a very macro view on things. So I'm able to say, okay, well, from a consumer who doesn't have industry knowledge and that doesn't understand your industry jargon, what's interesting to me based on my news feeds? And so I think that is really something that is a value add for founders who are really kind of industry specific and focused solely on their industry.
That makes a lot of sense. And I love generalists. Generalists are my favorite people. You might be able to tell I'm a generalist also. So, okay, you've done all of this stuff as a founder. What's your next step? What best practices can you recommend for a founder who's starting to do either their own PR or even working with you? What are the best ways to go about this?
Well, I'm really all about empowering the founder to do it themselves first, right? Because that's what I did. I had to do it myself. I didn't have any roadmap. So if you go onto my website, gloriachoupr.com, you can watch my free masterclass that talks about everything we talked about today, the CPR pitch, the do's and don'ts in detail, although I talk very fast. And it's actually in a very concise 30-minute masterclass, which I think is the equivalent of like a 6-hour class. But
wow.
I'm all about delivering a ton of value in a short amount of time. Go onto my website, watch that, and you will get your free PR roadmap for founders, which is a beautiful 7-page PDF that walks you through all the different talking points. And that is free. So that is definitely where you can start. It's going to allow you to make your media list. It's going to give you a template of how you can find your pitch using my CPR method, do's and don'ts, best times to pitch, all the things that we talked about, so that you have it and you don't have to memorize it. So do that first. And secondly, think about how you are able. So I would definitely do that. I would definitely do a Google News alert so that you can start to understand what are the different topics that are being talked about, right? And I would work on your mindset that getting rejected and cold calling, they're not bad things. They're actually like part of the process of getting your first yes, which is going to catapult you into the next level and catapult you the next level and the next level, right? I had a lot of founders who, before they worked with me, people wouldn't even respond to their emails. And because we got that first yes, that first feature, they now have speaking spots lined up for months. Right? Because they're able to position themselves. And now they're all of a sudden be able to get on the calendars of the investors who would not give them time of day, because it's all positioning, right? So work on your mindset and understand that there is some work that you need to do in the beginning, and be okay with comfortability, be okay with, getting rejected, because that is really what you need to be able to succeed. So work on those things, download my roadmap, watch my masterclass. And then if you have any questions, you can email me and DM me, and I can write out your pitch. So that's really kind of what I have. And in terms of for my own business and how I want to help founders, is I really would love to build out a course. There's a lot of online entrepreneurs that are doing different courses about, how to launch a course, or, how to make a website. I don't really see one for PR. Because so far PR is still so much in that, like, you need to hire an agency for 10 grand a month mindset, that a lot of founders just don't do PR because they just feel like they can never achieve that. So I want to make it accessible. And as part of that mission, I want to build a course where it's going to be all the different modules you need to learn. I'm going to give you templates. I'm going to give you speaking points of, if you were to call a journalist, what do you say? Right? How to use a press release, how to write the anatomy of a press release headline, the anatomy of a subject line, the anatomy of, your bio. I'm going to put that into a course so that, they can self-study. And I haven't really, started that yet, but I'm in the process of actually outlining all the different modules, and I want that to be evergreen and on demand so that founders can get value from it anytime they need to.
Wow, what a great idea. I love the idea of a course like that. Sign me up when it's done. Or if you need beta testers, let me know. But yeah, it's so wonderful that you're willing and interested in teaching people how to do this, because it is so empowering to be able to go, yeah, I did that. There's something very powerful about that. And so I send you a big debt of gratitude there for doing that. But yet you as a person, you've talked a lot about your goals as a business owner, but I'm curious a little bit about what are you actually curious about right now? Is the course the thing that's got you really revved up, or is there something else that you're really curious about and studying right now?
I am studying the course, but also in a greater study about how people are going to consume information and how the future of work is changing, right? So if we don't have these in-person networking events, if we aren't able to kind of go out to dinners and kind of do these coffee shop informal things, how can we still connect with each other? How can we still spread our message? And so I think the course is really an extension of that, and is really a reflection of how people are changing their models of how they do business and how they tell their story. And so I think that's why the e-learning space is just exploding.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really kind of the overall change from like in person, the power of the Rolodex, to the power of innovation and the power of organic outreach.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that organic outreach, there's an interactive level that is still feels more real somehow with the way you're talking about it than the once removed aspect of paying a big PR firm to do it for you. So that there's something very interesting about that. I love it. Do you have any references or resources or books or anything that you could recommend to somebody who is just starting out?
Well, I would definitely say, go to my website and download the roadmap. But in terms of for my own learning, I'm always constantly on Instagram, on LinkedIn, like following the entrepreneurs that I feel are trailblazers and have adopted this model of remote work, flexible work, organic outreach, content early on. And I'm able to kind of see how they're able to connect with their audience using the resources they already have. So I would definitely encourage you to follow the people who are thought leaders in your field, and you can find them through hashtags, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on LinkedIn, and you can kind of see what are the content that people are writing and how they build that organic traffic.
That's a great idea. Yeah, following hashtags like that, following the people who are gaining a lot of attention and traction in the hashtags that are relevant to you, sounds like it's a phenomenal idea, because then you can see, sort of standing on the shoulders of giants, see how other people have already done it and see what you can do in a similar way, even though yours should be unique because it's you doing it. That's lovely advice. Thank you, Gloria. So I have just one other question. So before we do that, I would love to thank you for taking the time to be on the show and for giving such amazing information. I would like to put all of the links, like to gloriachoupr.com and all of that. I'm going to put all of that in the show notes. And if there's anything else that you'd like to be in the show notes, like the link to the masterclass, anything like that, I'm happy to put that in for you so that you have anybody who's listening to this. If you're listening to this, obviously, this woman knows what she's talking about. So you need to follow her and get this information so that you can elevate your credibility and also ultimately your business. Oh, and I'll ask it the next time you're here. I was like, there's one other question that I'd love to ask, but that's okay. So let me ask you this one last question that I ask everybody who's on the show. And it's a silly question, but I find that people give amazing answers. And the question is this: if you had a plane that could skywrite something for the entire world to see, what would you say?
Ooh, that is amazing. This is awesome. This lights me up. Wow. If I had a sky plane that could write in the sky for everyone to see, it would be getting a no is a good thing. I am such a failure champion. I think the reason why I'm able to do what I do and be able to build my business is that I'm not afraid of no's. And I know that the secret to success is getting your first 100 no's. It allows you to be sharper. It allows you to gain an edge, and it allows you to basically use that feedback as information, and that's power. So I encourage everyone to get your first 100 no's.
I like that. Get your first 100 no's in the sky. Terrific. Well, Gloria, is there anything else that you would like to add that we haven't discussed yet?
This has been such an amazing discussion. You're just so awesome. And I actually want to look you up, but I will definitely encourage founders to go on my website, because I have tons of free information, my free masterclass, my beautiful roadmap that you can download so that you can start to DIY your own PR before you think about paying an expensive agency to do it for you. So go to gloriachoupr.com.
And as I said, the link to this will be in the show notes, so you can just go there, click to it, and you will get right to her website. And you must. I mean, you can obviously tell, as I said, she knows her stuff. Gloria, you are fabulous. I am so grateful to you for being here and for sharing all of your wisdom. If you have enjoyed this episode of the Innovative Mindset Podcast, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. You can comment, you can review. There's going to be a link to review the show on the show notes of this. I would love to hear about it. And I've also started a new practice. If you have a question for me, if you have a question about public speaking or creative leadership, drop me a line. Go to izoldat.com/question, and there's a little form you can fill out. And if your question ends up on the air, I got to tell you, it will also, I will lift you up, because if you leave me the website that you are sort of emailing about, I will also mention the website and get you a little bit more elevated PR as well. So that's izoldat.com/question. And I'm really grateful to Gloria Chou for joining me today. You're going to need to follow her, gloriachoupr.com. And until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg reminding you, kindness works. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2020. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I send you all of my love.